Oh boy. Well, everybody, this is one I've not really been looking forward to. This is Video Game Growing Pains, and this time we're talking about Final Fantasy XI. Now, the reason I'm not looking forward to it isn't because I think Final Fantasy XI is a bad game. Far from it, actually. I have surprising amount of respect for it. But the reason I'm not looking forward to it is, one, a general lack of experience with the game, and two, my rather petulant attitude towards it when it came out. Before we talk about Final Fantasy 11, let me give you a little history about myself. I grew up with Final Fantasy. I started with Final Fantasy 1 on the NES, and gradually I got to the rest of the series. I played 4 on the Super Nintendo. I got through 6 on Super Nintendo as well. I went through 5 and some of the earlier ones with emulators. I grew up with 7, 8, 9, and 10. I was a console gamer through and through. So hearing that Final Fantasy XI was going to be an online experience for both PC and for consoles, my enthusiasm for it sank. I'm not an online gamer. I'm not an MMO player. And honestly, I think that's a good explanation for why this game is divisive amongst certain fans. It's not because they think it's bad or that it's flawed like so many other titles. It's because of a difference in interest. You see, standard console gamers who like RPGs tend to enjoy the party dynamic. They tend to enjoy the fact that they are controlling a group and that they don't actually have to put themselves onto one character, but can watch the adventure unfold and feel a sense of togetherness and community with these characters. When you're in an MMO, you are sort of projecting yourself onto a character, and your social interaction is a lot more like the real world. You have to go and find it, and you have to go and make do with what you can do. And for some of us, the more socially awkward or the less socially inclined, the misanthropic, what have you, that's not something we want to do. So players trying to enjoy Final Fantasy XI would probably be out of luck because it's just not their style of play. Now, this is the reason that I took so long to sort of get into the game and why I didn't really play it all the way to completion. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Anyway, Final Fantasy XI is kind of a landmark for the series because it was the first cross-platform and PC console RPG, available on 2 separate generations of consoles: the PS2, the Xbox 360, and currently available on the PC on Steam, and was really kind of a landmark because it sort of helped cement certain ideas of gameplay that would be continued throughout the rest of the series. I really am not fond of these ideas of gameplay, but that's neither here nor there. So, what's the game's story? Basically, we're set in the world of Vana'diel. We have 5 groups, 5 races that you can pick to start off with. The Hooms, humans. The Galka, an imposing beast-like race. The Mithra, a mostly female, almost elven race. The Elvan, yeah, they were not trying with that one. And the Tarutaru, who are sort of like halflings. Each of them has their own stats, their own story, and while I don't really like the aesthetics of these, I don't really think that this belongs to Mr. Nomura or Mr. Amano. I just don't really care for the aesthetics. I do recognize that the difference in race helps flesh out the world, and it gives people a nice bit of choice with character creation starting. The story focuses on these 5 races to actually cope with a resurgence of beastmen in the world who are trying to cause havoc. It leads to a lot of people getting together, trying to do guild work and help cities out, trying to protect them from this oncoming war. And really, a lot of the action in game is carried by players. The final battle, as it were, we'll get to that, features the players going up against Dark Shadow Lord as a group trying to protect the world they love from being destroyed. Now, all of this is kind of stock. The real interesting part of the game is the character created adventures. A lot of the story here is created by players. They do get a lot of setup and background, and they will follow basically a standard mission structure, but you are influencing the story and you are creating it, and not just you, but hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of hundreds of thousands of people. That's what kind of made the game interesting was you're no longer just the chosen warriors, you are an adventurer and you can work with other adventurers to grow and advance. It's kind of an interesting take on the storytelling. Now, from what I've seen, the script is much better than Final Fantasy X was, and we got, I think, a little bit better voice acting. Though that was probably to be expected because this was meant to be a long-running series, something that would not just be you buy it, you're done. It would be supported for years to come, and it has been for almost over a decade, honestly. Final Fantasy XI is the most financially successful of the series. Now, the reason I don't want to get too much more into story is because it doesn't actually end. We have, I believe, 5 main expansions which add entirely new story bits and countless add-ons which can be bought to add new, smaller side stories. So, it's a game that truly has gone and evolved. It's not a static world like Final Fantasy X's was. You can continually go into the world months apart, and it will change as you go in. It will be different. This is both good and bad. Good in that you're never bored with it, but bad that you don't always have a concrete experience to build off of. You'll have good and bad ones. Anyway, graphically, yeah, I've said that I don't really care for the character designs, but monster designs, in-game graphics, the overall environment and world are absolutely gorgeous. You have everything from floating cities, crystalline citadels, dark wastelands and caves. Everything here has a very Final Fantasy X to the next level look. Like, it has the same kind of shading and graphics as 10, but it's much more advanced. While this may make it seem a little dated now, I still think the game's very pretty to play, and if they actually made an offline component, I would totally play it. Now, I've said that I don't like the character aesthetic, but that's really just a nitpick. The monster aesthetic is beautiful and great, and the same for summoned beasts, vehicles, and buildings. Very, very pretty. The music by Nobuo Uematsu is once again excellent. Distant Worlds is actually a very charming theme that I only heard after going to the Distant Worlds music concert in Virginia. That's actually what sort of got me to take a look into the series was his music, because Mr. Uematsu just can't do any wrong with music. The series really benefited from his musical scores, and while not all of them are hits, I think all of them are suitable, and all of them are very fun to listen to for the most part. Now, combat is a mixed bag for me. None of it is bad, and I have to marvel at what they did. You see, with Final Fantasy XI, they took the idea of Final Fantasy and smooshed the best parts of Final Fantasy into an MMO. What do you do in an MMO? Well, you click on enemies till they die, you spam your ultras and your special moves, and you work as a group. Well, with Final Fantasy XI, they tried to give it a sort of Final Fantasy V mixed with Final Fantasy X feel. The game is determined by job classes. Everybody has a basic set of job classes and several advanced job classes, which, to my knowledge, have never reappeared in any other Final Fantasy, giving it a very unique feel. These job classes give you your abilities, which are your hotkey and spammable attacks, and magic works in the same way, except that it takes a little bit more time and requires MP. This gives the game a much more Final Fantasy feel, even if we are basically playing a one-player, MMO. Now, why I say it's a little bit like 5 is not just the job system, but the variety. You can form parties of up to 6 characters, and you can form up to 3 parties to make an alliance to actually take on the many dungeons and bosses together. This gives you a lot of variety to play around with, but it also makes it feel a lot like 5, where you have parties who can combo together, support groups who are helping offense groups. You have a lot of different choice, from your Dark Knights and Puppeteers to your Scholars and Pirates. There's a lot that you can really do with the job system here. I don't like it, but that's just me. I still recognize that I think it's a very good job system for the MMO players. And what I like is that they did basically try and translate the core of what Final Fantasy was into the system. From the random encounters and the job classes to the quest-based world to the interesting aesthetics you can get from summoners and vehicles. It really was a very clean transfer, I think, with exception to the races, because, again, personal prejudice. Now, again, I only played a little bit of this. I like the game for what it is, but I'm not willing to pay the monthly fee and I'm not willing to invest my time in it. So I've never gotten an in-depth view of it. That's why we're not covering the rest of the story segments. That's why I'm going to spend only a little bit of time talking about this. But I think that Final Fantasy XI was both a very good thing and a very bad thing. If Final Fantasy XI were the last Final Fantasy, it would probably be going out on a high note. The series would be at its peak popularity, we would still have our great composer, and it would be a smooth transition going from the typical turn-based battling of the NES all the way evolving into real-time combat with a lot of the same sensibilities. However, the problem lies with its evolution after this. You see, Final Fantasy kept going even after 11, but the problem was it took a lot of the sensibilities of 11 and MMOs and tried to bring it backstep onto consoles. Now, this is why I think 11 is a bad thing for the series, because honestly, MMO concepts can work offline. Dot Hack has done it very well, and a few other games have as well, but generally, the reason you play a Final Fantasy game is the party system and the worldview, and you can kind of do that with Final Fantasy 11. But when you take a game that's usually giving you control of 3 to 5 people, and then basically give you control of yourself, and then the computer controls everyone else, then we got a problem. That's what we're looking into next time, everybody. One of the games that honestly was the nail in the coffin for me, and which pretty much destroyed my love in Final Fantasy. Wasn't the final strike, no, that comes later. But next time, we're going to look at Final Fantasy XII. Before that, though, let me just say this. I don't like Final Fantasy XI. I don't think it's a bad game, though. Honestly, the online concepts that it tried to introduce, the cross-platforming, the smooth transition from one type of game to another, it's all pretty admirable. And the game is still active today. Still got a very active fan base. And I gotta say kudos to Square for supporting it as much as they did. I am glad that it exists, but I admit that when it came out, I didn't want to play it, I didn't like it, and to this day, I still don't care for it. It's not my thing. But I am still glad that it exists. I'm not glad for the changes that it caused in the series, but honestly, that's on the developers. That's not on the game. My personal opinion of Final Fantasy XI, if you like MMOs, give it a try. If you like Final Fantasy, give it a try. You may not stick with it, but, download a demo or take a trial period. Give it a little bit of a playthrough. You might enjoy it. Final Fantasy XII, on the other hand, oh boy, that's going to be fun. Wait, what's the opposite of fun? Oh, right, painful. Well, see you next time, everybody. Final Fantasy XII.